nostalgia for the end of the world or apocalyptic vision. It made me realize, like, I feel closer now.
Nostalgia for doomsday.
This slower, extended, like, world crashing thing that's going to take.
I'm reaching out to see
that's the end of the world.
Current apocalypse measures up to the ones in our youth.
So you get a like slack ass type of into the world, right?
I love the welcome to the end, John. I love that invite I got in Zoom and like.
Oh, good. So I think I'll start with the welcome to the end. You know. So John, how do you pronounce your last name? I always read it, and then I always think of you as the straw man, just because I see your social.
Yeah. That's how you pronounce it. The straw man.
Straw man. Okay.
No, it's Engelbrecht, but it's it's German. So are you? Can I ask you a question? Where are you physically located these days? Are you in Iowa? Are you down south?
So I'm in Louisiana right now. It's not as exciting as those Girls Gone Wild videos would have you believe because of the quarantine. PS1. Are you still involved in that?
Yep, I am. It's good. It's craziness. We'll have a new space, and hopefully we'll have a residency space and be able to bring people. And it ties back into this a little bit because I've been thinking about it as like to me in some ways it's kind of like the apex. This place that will be can last a while, but in the back of my head, I think about this space as like this is where the last years happen. It's complicated to talk about, 20 years from now, like, does that time even exist? And if it exists, like, will there be art spaces and that sort of thing? Or will, like the world have corrupted to the point where
indentured servants on Mars?
With your prompt, I was struggling to think back, and all my references were kind of dumb, like Y2K, dad like having 5-gallon water jugs in the basement suddenly for some reason, and that was it. Yeah. Y2K had such a good lead up to it. That's probably why it's in everyone's mind.
Y2K was heavily advertised.
And what was it? Was it Hail Bop or whatever? What that comet that.
I forgot about Hell Bop. I remember that was supposed to be a big thing.
Or what was the cult? It was like Heaven's Gate. Was it
Heaven's Gate? You were so right. I had remembered the tennis shoes.
I don't know if my friends were just boring or we were just more interested in trying to figure out. I grew up in Rapid City, South Dakota, so small town.
Ooh.
In a lot of ways felt disconnected from, but wanting to know what's going on in the world, but not knowing how to figure that out other than these mainstream means.
Let's talk about V, because I barely remember. Knight Rider was on TV.
Yeah. Well, V came out when I must have been like 7 or 8. My memory of it is really more of just a couple images in my head and a feeling. So I don't remember the plot of it at all.
That's great, because that's what I remember of it is feeling, and I remember 1 or 2 scenes.
I'm interested to know which scenes you remember, because the one that like is just seared into my memory has to do with the protagonist. The viewpoint of the image is from his viewpoint. He's looking through blinds of some sort, or maybe it's a vent. Maybe it's a vent he's looking through. He's looking into a mirror, and there's an alien in front of him who's also looking into the mirror, and he sees, I think it's the alien's eyes change to reptilian eyes. There's this like moment where he witnesses the alien, which up until that point has had human form, start to reveal what's underneath the skin.
Ooh.
And there's an element of voyeurism, but more than voyeurism, it's like being someplace and witnessing this thing that there's a fear there, right? Because I think he was aboard the alien ship or something like that. You know, he was in their space somehow. Let's go with what you remember, because mine's more just like looking at the Wikipedia article.
I've always thought like I should probably prep by getting people's what they're going to talk about, but I'm liking that I don't. So two things I remember. I remember there was people ripping their faces off, and there'd be like the lizard scales. I remember there was a character who was kind of a nerdy character. Had all the signals in the 80s of a nerd, you know, and he was the good alien who was trying to pass as human, and he identified with the humans and was always hanging out with them, but he was still an alien. I remember there were a lot of like cat fights in the space. Two women with big hair that would like roll on the ground fighting with each other. It was like very, very campy and very like career women, bitches, right? Like seemed to be the message, you know, so that the aliens were all in disarray because these women were running a lot of the show in terms of the invasion. There were a few humans who weren't going along with things. I was never interested in what the humans were doing. Like they were just boring. They'd blow up some factory or they'd do something like that. Car chases. I was only interested in the alien ladies that were having the cat fights and like overturning tables and stuff like this. That was when I was like, that's the type of civilization I want to see, you know. Oh, wow, look at that. I'm kind of disappearing.
Your skin's coming off like
no,
like the aliens in V. Like
they presented themselves as helping and being paternal.
Yeah, that's correct. And but I only know that from the Wikipedia, and the Wikipedia talks about like how in some ways it was about anti-fascism, and I'm like, is it real? You know, like it was based on some story I can't remember about like it can happen here too, or like fascism can happen in the US.
Because I think the TV show was a much trashier type of thing. You've heard about that lizards running the government conspiracy?
Yeah, that's the other thing that's interesting about V is that it's reptiles under, you know, like they're reptilians. So that you take with it that cultural baggage of like, of course, the aliens are going to be some lesser species that are cold-blooded. That red V that's always over the various things like graffiti V and like
sort of biblical.
The miniseries, it was a really pessimistic ending. The humans had been overtaken sort of, and their best hope was that they could send out a signal into space that they needed help at this point. But the feeling that I had in the early 90s in Rapid City, South Dakota was like, just like all's ahead of me was just mundane, same old stuff. Everything that was ever going to be done had been done. And all that was ahead of us at this point was a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork. And the world was like, it was just boring because everything had been done. And then sort of the internet came along.
Discovering the internet was a big eye opener, even though a lot of the early websites were like, here's what happens when you put a Twinkie in the microwave. You know, there were a lot of stupid things on the internet, but
yeah, it was bad, but it was also good. You could get the bad information without a whole bunch of other excess shit. And now it's just like, you can't find that bad information without like sifting through corporate ads, and everything is like Google ad driven. Yeah, Kalmia last night said the internet is trash now, and that's...
Oh, I believe it. One of the easiest ways to have an audience is to post stuff online, but then it's like, oh, you get a few likes, and what kind of feedback was it to have a smiley face or a heart? You know, that's the same as someone saying, "Oh, old man, nice try."
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, I went on a date to see Kids. Back in the early, like, that was a mistake. Maybe not a good first date movie. I thought this was a really fun interview.
Yeah, No, I'm glad. I was looking forward to it, and it's always just good to catch up with you. And
I'm so happy when I get a hold of people